It is getting incredibly spicy just before the UAP hearing that will be taking place later on today at the time of me recording this video. As Dr. Gary Nolan has been making some incredibly huge claims with regards to some strange materials that have been retrieved from a site in New Mexico, which includes an alleged quote-unquote alien honeycomb, so we'll be going over that. But more specifically, we'll be talking about Representative Luna, who was on all sorts of news outlets recently, ahead of this UAP hearing, clearly trying to get the word out that this will be taking place, right? And she says that apparently there's a bipartisan UFO meeting with Russia, and we'll get into that as well, because there's a lot of information, obviously, with regards to not just Russia, but why Russia in particular, and why that's related to George Knapp, who will be testifying in Congress. And we've also got some information from Luna that says that someone brandished a weapon in a threatening manner to David Grush, and that was disclosed to her in the skiff earlier this week, which is why the whistleblower protection is one of the largest parts of this UFO hearing. There's obviously a shed load to go over in this video, right? But we'll get into Dr. Gary Nolan first with his claims. So obviously, like I said, they've retrieved something. He not specifically said what. Well, he has said what, but from a site in New Mexico, right? And it's an alleged quote-unquote alien honeycomb with a silvery black friable metal with a clear aluminium base with pieces in odd patterns, right? So take a little listen to this, because this is pretty huge.
And for us, for me, with the Atacama, it then became clear by bringing in the necessary experts that, oh, well, here's how you fix it. Oh, voila, the image gets clear. It's a human child, and here are some potential mutations that cause it. So with the metals and the materials that I recall us bringing back, one were the so-called, what was it? The alien honeycomb, as it was called at the time. And it definitely looked strange. There was another, which was kind of this silvery black covered metal that was slightly friable. And then there were a few clear pieces of metal that looked like aluminum with kind of scratchings and etchings on them. Not etchings as if somebody was writing hieroglyphics, just kind of a pattern with a brown substance on them. And there might have been one or two more that we found. And in fact, Diana was like a divine.
Now, obviously, that's pretty big deal, considering everything that we're finding out about UAPs and, reverse engineer programs and all of this stuff. Suddenly, Dr. Gary Nolan just chimes in and is like, oh yeah, by the way, we've also got this. I remember just collecting this from New Mexico this one time. It was great. But obviously, the big stories right now are coming out from Representative Luna. Now, George Knapp is going to be one person that is going to be testifying in front of Congress with everything that he knows, right? Hopefully, I'm praying that we get another huge crash out from Jeremy Corbell, because that would be absolutely incredible, because obviously that was the highlight with the Immaculate Constellation stuff back at the last hearing, was it last year or earlier this year? I can't remember. Now, George Knapp essentially back in the 1980s went over to Russia, right? And he stumbled across a bunch of paperwork about reverse engineering alien tech, or like crash retrieve craft. And he just smuggled that out of Russia. Now, the size of the testicles on this man needed to do something like that in a place like Russia is unholy, right? But he did it. And apparently the information that's been found has been spoken about by Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp over the years. Like, there's a clip right here from Jeremy Corbell talking about Russia reverse engineering UAP craft.
It's an incredible thing that the UFO topic, this is something that Bob Lazar has always said, it's a crime against the scientific community when you can't share this stuff, the reverse engineering programs. It's not part of the scientific process to keep everything so compartmentalized. we're not going to name him, but you and I both know a scientist who's been involved in a reverse engineering program that was from a Russian crash that has to do with lasers. And I think that's okay to say, but you're aware of what I'm saying.
I am, and that's what I was started to say is the Russian provocations where their warplanes fly very close to us. I think it's related to something that they have developed from crashes. That is what I've been told, is that they've developed a weapon system that they can't wait to use against us, and that it came from somewhere else.
Wow, that's crazy, man. Well, I guess that is the whole point of the secrecy. If the UFO reality is what it appears to be, and if our governments are trying to study the UFO technology, and if they are keeping it hidden from the American and kind of global public because of the reason that they want to get a technological advantage, it really makes sense to me. And this is what we're both told over all this time of looking at this, that we are all in a race that people don't know about. But it's a technological race, because anybody that develops this weaponization technology based on the material science of the reverse engineering of these UFOs, they win, hands down, they win. We can create a laser beam or something like that, but these weapons of mass destruction that can be created by reverse engineering the technology, if all of that is true, I get why some of the secrecy is there. You don't want this to get out. You have to hide it.
Well, it's not just speculation. We can guess about it right now, what our government is trying to do in reverse engineering. The Russians that we talked to back then were very clear about it. They were trying to reverse engineer that technology from UFOs.
Yeah.
That was their goal. That was the goal of a nationwide, massively intensive UFO investigation for a decade and programs that followed, and I'll bet it's still going on.
People talk about disclosure all the time, whatever that means. Like, the public is told about UFOs. If anything brought us close to that, would you say this Russia experience of you coming back, getting all this information, for you, was that a personal version of, holy shit, this is true?
Absolutely.
Now, this is not a new clip at all. This came back out in 2023, I think it was. But since then, Jeremy Corbell has been on the Joe Rogan Experience and has spoken about the story of when George Knapp smuggled out these documents about reverse engineer craft from Russia. Now, the reason that this ties in to what I'm going to show you next is because Representative Luna, who of course is spearheading this hearing and has obviously, probably heard some information from George Knapp prior to the hearing where he's going to testify under oath, has basically said that there's a bipartisan UFO meeting that's going to be taking place with Russia. The fact that that's even going to happen, because obviously Russia and America have got a bit of history, and Russia's are usually a very secretive kind of place. It's interesting that that's actually going to be the case, but here's what Representative Luna had to say on the matter.
What is the context for the Russia program? What can we expect about that? Obviously, when you hear Russia, people's eyes light up.
Yeah, so there's over 300 pages that will be submitted into the congressional record, of which people will be able to go through themselves. And really my main question for Mr. Knapp is, and of course every member of Congress wants to know, how do you prove that this isn't actual disinformation that was handed over to American journalists or smuggled out of Russia by the KGB? And I think the real answer to that, in my opinion, is that we're not the only country that's actually looked into this. We actually have multiple parliaments that have announced hearings similar to what we're doing here in Washington, D.C., ranging from Mexico to Brazil to other countries as well, that are looking into launching their own task force. And so, to my knowledge, the Russian government did have something similar. I can tell you, Cuomo, that I actually met with the Russian government recently and asked them point blank if they had any information to share on this topic. And on that same front, we are looking forward to actually doing a bipartisan meeting with the Russian parliament here pretty soon. So we're trying to get that on the books.
I mean, that's quite a big deal. That's quite a big deal. Russia aren't exactly the people that tend to share their secrets. So the fact that this has been able to be organised, at least, is a step in the right direction. But we'll see. Anyway, the last thing that we're going to talk about before the big UAP hearing takes place later on today is the fact of David Grush. Now, Luna's already come out and stated that they tried to get whistleblowers to come forward and testify under oath, but she couldn't. And the reason that she couldn't was because whistleblowers just didn't feel safe. They were too intimidated by the prospect of what could happen if they were to testify. And that is no better summed up than what we're about to hear, because obviously Luna earlier this week had David Grush in the skiff, which of course is the very secretive room where, what goes in there stays in there, essentially. until you go on national TV and blurt out what's happened in there. But essentially, Luna stated that David Grush had a weapon basically brandished on him, and that's part of the reason as to why whistleblowers didn't want to come forward. And obviously one of the big taglines for this UAP hearing is whistleblower protection and safety. That's one of the big things that they're really trying to hammer home in this hearing. So let's listen to what Luna had to say on that.
We have some good testimony from witnesses. Not to mention, again, you should ask Grush about the weird incident that happened prior to him going into the skiff with me and Representative Burleson. Something happened as he was driving in to do a VTC with us. So it's very interesting kind of handling this topic. Obviously, you know, anytime someone says, no, don't look there, you know me, Cuomo, I always tend to look and see what we can find. And what I can tell you is, you know, there are many people from all across the DOD, across the entire U.S. government. Over 30 people, to include our own Secretary of State, have come forward and said, you know, there's something here. And so I think to question it, to look at the evidence, and then decide for yourself what you have to see on the matter.
Joe Khalil, News Nation, got us the reporting. You can't just throw the Grush thing out there like that and not tell me what do you know about it? And why do I have to ask him? Do you know what it is?
Because I don't want to take that away from him, and law enforcement is involved. But in my opinion, if you are going to brandish any weapons at congressional staffers, it's very alarming, and I will leave it at that. But what I can tell you is it was very interesting in timing, and based on what we've heard previously with some of these witnesses, to include some witness testimony that you'll hear tomorrow, this is not the first documented case of this, which is incredibly important as to how do we address this in the future. First of all, whistleblower protections need to be a lot stronger. We also have different UAP legislation where these members of Congress are coming together. And I do think that also, you know, there's a lot going on in the Hill. As you know, Cuomo, there's a lot of partisan stuff, but this is one of the few bipartisan things that we've been collectively able to work on together.
Now, obviously, you probably heard that there, and, you know, she referenced him as a congressional staffer, which he is, because for Representative Burleson, he is an advisor, or he's taken on an advisor role for Burleson on the UAP topic. So he, you know, by association, is a congressional staffer. So someone has pulled a weapon essentially on a congressional staffer, which is a big no-no. I mean, pulling a weapon on anyone is a big no-no, but if they're part of government, it's an even bigger no-no. So don't go doing stuff like that, essentially. What do you guys make of all of this? Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are down in the comments below. Obviously, I'm very intrigued to see what comes out of the hearing later on today. Very, very excited. Let me know what you guys think about all of it down in the comments. Jump scare the hell out of that like button, subscribe, you know all the good stuff to do, and I'll speak to you later. Peace.